Hi there, and welcome to the Leadership Dance. I'm Alissa, and today's guest is my good friend and former colleague from Google, Shweta Maniar. Shweta is a life sciences leader with expertise in using technology to transform healthcare and life sciences. She currently helps life science companies leverage Google Cloud and AI and machine learning for business transformation. Previously at Genentech, she spearheaded initiatives in personalized healthcare, data partnerships, and innovative commercial strategies, earning her recognition as a top influencer in the pharmaceutical industry. Shweta is also a board member for companies like RxSight and OrthoFix, is involved in city government, and is an avid almond farmer. And I definitely want to hear more about that. Welcome to the podcast, Shweta.
Thank you so much for having me, Alissa. Really looking forward to the conversation.
You have had such an impressive and unconventional career, which I want to hear more about. But I wanted to start by going back to your childhood and ask, what was your upbringing like? Often in South Asian and Asian American families, our parents have big dreams and high expectations for us. And I know your parents had a big influence on you. How did your cultural background and values influence how you approached your career and life?
So I'm very glad that you asked that question, Alissa. Growing up as the first generation South Asian American, it really was a unique experience because you're constantly straddling two different worlds. You have a world at home and you have a world at your school or wherever you are. And so you're trying to navigate both cultures, your culture, your Asian culture at home, but also the American way outside. My parents, of course, they immigrated and they had their big dreams and aspirations for themselves. And they were raising us in what they understood about the world that they left from India. But also, I give my parents a lot of credit because they understood when you're coming to a different country, you don't just try to preserve and take everything from where you are from, but also in the importance of embracing where you have now come, to make that your home, to make that part of your culture. And so while there was a constant emphasis on excelling in academics, it wasn't around going into healthcare or engineering or, what are the more typical careers. It was around excelling and being the best at what you are very good and passionate about. And I give them a ton of credit because I think for that time and era, that was pretty forward thinking of them to be like that. And so I was the one who originally was looking at having my career in healthcare, and I can very confidently say it wasn't a push from the family. But then, of course, I eventually discovered my passion more on the tech and the business side, and I ended up where I was supposed to be. So while it was a departure from where I originally thought my path was going to be, I've been very fortunate to have good support from my family where they recognized my drive and ambition. I will say, though, that my Indian heritage or Indian culture actually has influenced the way I was brought up in the sense of my values and approach to life. There was a strong emphasis on family and community. But when I came here, I didn't have any family here. There was nobody around. And so your community and your family become the people that you work, that you are with around, right? Even if they're not your aunts or your uncles or your cousins and such. So realizing the sense of community or the people with whom you spend time with, I realize now in hindsight was actually what was key to the importance of relationships and giving back. And the cultural value of resilience and perseverance has also really been important in kind of navigating challenges and setbacks that I've had throughout my schooling as well as my career. I'd also say that this has all shaped me who I am as a person today, but it's really all of these individual things that have happened as I grew up, straddling these two cultures, trying to be American enough to be American, but Indian enough to be Indian, right? There's always that kind of, you're straddling the two. It really does impact the way that you think about your work ethic. It really forces you to become very resilient. And I will say that as I have grown up and now as, of course, well into adulthood, it also is given me appreciation that I can actually appreciate being both. I can appreciate my heritage while also appreciate being an American. And so I have now been able to, and now I have my own life and my own family, balance tradition from both sides of the cultures that I've grown up with. And I think that really continues to guide my approach to career and personal life.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You talk about this concept of preserving where you came from or the past and embracing where you are today. And I think that is a challenge for anyone that grew up with immigrant parents. So I know for me, my sister only spoke Chinese. She's older than me. She only spoke Chinese at home. But then after she started at school, the other kids made fun of her. And so my parents decided we're going to stop speaking Chinese to the kids at home. We're going to speak English. And I think there is this desire to assimilate into the culture, but that balance of how do you still retain your culture at home? And I'm just curious, like with your kids today, now you're one generation removed, what are some of the things you're doing to preserve your Indian culture while also being very American?
Yeah. Oh, you brought me like goosebumps. So, it's really interesting. So you're saying that, in order to help assimilate your family, stop speaking Chinese at home. Uh, there was a time when I was growing up where even though I knew how to speak Hindi, I would be spoken Hindi too, and I would respond in English, right?
Same.
Because, right? Exactly. And it's funny because sometimes when I think about the languages and I think, did I hear that in English or in a Hindi? Now, as as an adult, I'm wondering if it's still translated the same way in my head. But now for my children, you realize you're going through this for the first time where you're trying to straddle different traditions and you're trying to straddle, okay, well, if I've learned the best of my heritage, now I need to choose from the best of the heritage that I've learned. I've got to pick and choose what I want to continue on. And one of the things that I actually firmly believe is that language is a big piece of it. And so I have been focused so much on having our kids learn Hindi. Maybe reading and writing will be a part of it in the future, but they're actually taking conversational Hindi classes. And it's actually forcing me to use more Hindi at home where I have not historically spoken a lot of Hindi at home. So it's almost like the tables have turned where I was responding in English my entire life. And now I'm trying to speak more Hindi at home so that the kids will feel that this is not just a class I go to and for 1 hour a week I have to speak Hindi, but they're realizing that this is something that I might just ask them, how was your day in Hindi and things like that. So that's one big piece. And the other, of course, is going to be, there's so many holidays and traditions and celebrations that different cultures have. And then not just appreciating the Indian or South Asian culture of Diwali and Holi and all of these great celebrations that have a lot of significance. We live in a really amazing time where we get to actually learn and appreciate a lot of different cultures too. And so we take a pretty intentional effort in our home to not just be able to understand the celebrations that happen around the world, but take time to read about them and learn about them so we can understand a little bit more of the significance. And for Diwali, because it is coming up shortly, I did have just recently took a book out from the library, which was a small kids chapter book where it talks about the mythology that essentially has led up to what is Diwali. It was really great to hear the kids appreciate what it means to light the candles and good over evil, light over darkness. It's been wonderful to see and be able to try to pass on the best that we can pick up for our family now.
Yeah, it sounds like you're taking such a great approach of trying to preserve your cultural heritage. And it's actually amazing to hear that you were able to find books at the library about Diwali because, not that much in the past has been written about other cultures, but
Absolutely.
It's good to see so much more out there.
Yes, exactly.
So something we have in common that others may not know about you is that you also grew up dancing. You're a classically trained Indian dancer, and you mentioned to me that you're thinking of getting serious about dance again. Can you tell us more about your dance background and how dance has been a part of your life?
I hope my guru, my teacher is not listening to this podcast because I'll be having to sign up back for classes very quickly here. You are absolutely right. Dance has actually been a significant part of my life. I started learning Kathak, a classical Indian dance form, at a very young age. And my guru, my teacher, Srimati Anuradha Nag, she is a renowned Kathak dancer, and she opened her school in the Bay Area and continues to teach. But she wasn't just a teacher. I think part of what drew me to her wasn't just that I enjoyed dancing, I enjoyed learning. It was a way to, of course, connect with my culture, but also she instilled a deep respect for like the art form. But not just the art, it was like the discipline, the rich art of storytelling through dance. Kathak is what I very much liken to, there's, many classical dance forms, but ballet is the one that I would liken it to in the sense that it is an absolute telling a story without words type of dance. And so beyond the technical aspects of like rhythmic patterns and expressive gestures and all of that, my guru has instilled life lessons that are really well beyond the dance floor. It wasn't a once a week thing. I wouldn't go to class just once a week. I would go to multiple classes a week, and class didn't just finish in 1 hour. It would finish sometimes whenever she felt like it was done, right? 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later, particularly as we were getting older and older. And she also taught me the importance of dedication, perseverance, pushing boundaries. And never in one person have I found a teacher, a mother, a mentor, a sister, somebody who has really taught me all parts of my life, right? If there was something good to share about my career, about my schooling, I wouldn't be just sharing with my family. She was also somebody that I would share that excitement with. So she's very much responsible for not just my dance journey, but also a lot of my personal growth. And so she really did take the time. This dance form has taught me the value of practice, the value of patience, the attention to detail, practice. It's my son has recently taught me this, right? Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect, right?
Mm.
And so these are qualities, right? He's the one that taught me this. But these qualities have been very invaluable in my career. I think that work ethic has really translated into ways that I never would have likened what dance has done for me. And so the ability to connect to an audience through movement, through expressions, and then now in my professional context, through communication. And I'm still thankful to my guru today, even if I'm not in class. And I promise I will coming back to class very soon. It has been a while, but I'm hoping that muscle memory and the emotional connection will actually help draw me right back to where I stopped.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you and I have talked about this before, but I think, my having been a former dancer, it took me a while to realize that what I learned from dance has actually made me a better leader. And you talked about patience and discipline and perseverance and connecting with others and even storytelling. All of those things, I think, serve us well in whatever we do, whether we're dancing or we're in the boardroom. So I totally agree with that. And it also sounds like earlier you talked about community and having to build your own community here. And that certainly sounded like a big community and a very important community as you were growing up. So I hope your dance teacher is listening to this and knows that you really appreciate everything you've learned from her.
Absolutely.
So you were one of the first people I met when I joined Google Cloud in 2020. And, I'm still so thankful to you because you were such a big help to me. I think you were assigned as my mentor and you really helped me onboarding because I'd never worked at a tech company. I moved from Johnson & Johnson, many years at J&J, over to Google. And we certainly had some crazy and fun times working together. But I wanted to ask you, because people often ask me, how did you make the transition from a background in healthcare and life sciences to work in big tech, to move over to Google? Because people want to know, how do you make that leap?
The first thing, Alissa, you're absolutely right. We do go back quite a ways. And the time in the world in 2020 when you joined, those early days were quite a whirlwind. So I will not forget that time period, of course, of working together. When it comes to my own journey coming to Google Cloud, it was a bit conventional, right? As you know, I started out my career in healthcare and I worked in hospitals, in research, translational orthopedic research, bench research for musculoskeletal diseases, working in organizations such as the Cleveland Clinic, Scripps Clinic. And I was really very passionate about improving patient care and advancing medical innovation, but it really wasn't in the traditional context of being a healthcare provider. And then I also started having a growing interest in technology and its potential to transform healthcare. And so I had an opportunity while I was in the Cleveland area to start seeing how technology actually could streamline a lot of processes. How do you do tech transfer? How does an idea go from that proverbial cocktail napkin to something that becomes a physical device that then gets licensed to a device company? And then Eventually, after supporting some work on the medical devices side, I joined Genentech in South San Francisco, or Roche for those who are listening, where I actually had the opportunity to work on how does a more traditional company like Genentech, like Roche, look at bringing technology into their organization. So how do you think about data as part of your products and portfolio? How do you look at technology to support understanding what patients need your medicine? How can you use technology in the development of your medicines, identifying your patients? And so that experience really solidified my belief that tech actually had a role to, and frankly, was a key to unlock a lot of the advancements in healthcare and in life sciences. So before joining Google, I was actually on the other side where I was on the receiving end of how technology positions itself to support the industry. And Alissa, I know you remember this, but 10 years ago, 15 years ago, tech companies will say, we're here to disrupt. We're here to disrupt healthcare. Nobody in healthcare wants to be disrupted. You have to be much more thoughtful about how a tech company wants to enter and support a space. And so that was one of my first things, I think, when I came to Google, is we don't want to use the word disrupt, right? Google has done such a fantastic job, frankly, about bringing in people from the industries that they're looking to lead into, right? Or looking to enable. And so that really is that drew me to Google, right? Google's mission has been to make information, or the world's information, universally accessible and useful. And when you put that in a healthcare and life sciences context, it's also how do you make, democratizing access to healthcare information in a secure manner. And so that's really where I saw an opportunity where I could bring all these disparate, research and, working with medical devices and working in a pharmaceutical company, all of these now meaningful for an organization that is entering or has entered the healthcare and life science industry as a key player, right? We are now in an ecosystem where it's not just a payer provider and a life sciences company. Really, technology also has a role in this ecosystem. So the transition from healthcare to tech was definitely a learning curve. There is, I think, a learning curve. There probably is even an added one when you come to a company like Google. The pace was faster. The culture was really different. The technology is always, of course, constantly evolving, but it's been incredibly rewarding. I will say one of my biggest learnings about coming from where I was to Google was that pace and the culture. And the culture, what I mean by that is when I was at some of my prior roles, if you were working on a document and I needed to circulate that document for several people to review, you want to make sure that you're like 95% done. You reviewed everything. It is almost in perfect form. And here you go, Alissa, I would like for you to review it. And what I noticed, and I'd love to hear if this is also similar to your experience when you joined Google, there was an expectation of like, send it out. And I was thinking, oh, how am I supposed to do that? Like I just started this morning. I'm not going to be finished with this thing. And realizing that it was like, send it out, even if it's 15% done, because people can start collaborating and putting their thoughts in. And it's not about me making a document. It was how we together create something. That was, yes, I would say, the biggest change.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that when I joined Google as well, because it's such an open culture. Like you talked about the cultural differences. And to me, it was like, you just share everything. And I had the same reaction. I was tasked with defining the medtech strategy, and I had a hypothesis. I put some thoughts on paper, and immediately people are like, well, send it out, just like you said. And people start commenting, and I had to have one engineer tell me, like, you don't have to respond to every comment. Like, people are just sharing their knowledge and giving you recommendations, but you can ignore their comments. And that was really hard for me, because coming from a culture where, yeah, you have to almost have it be perfect before it's seen, and you want to make sure everyone's aligned. It was very different, but I liked that approach, because you get more diverse perspectives very early on, so you have time to incorporate them.
Yes, exactly.
So I want to shift a little bit and pick up on something you talked about, which is technology's role in actually either disrupting healthcare, which I agree with you. I think healthcare organizations don't want to hear that tech companies are coming in to disrupt their business, but really thinking about technology as transformative and being able to make industries better, to improve patient lives, and really using AI for good. And one of the most exciting technologies that Google has come out with is from DeepMind, which is DeepMind's AlphaFold AI system. And congratulations to Google and DeepMind for recently winning the Nobel Prize for Chemistry for AlphaFold, which is just incredible. For our listeners, can you tell us what is AlphaFold? What is its application in healthcare? Why is it so potentially transformative for people's lives?
So it is very exciting. It was wonderful to wake up, see this news, and well deserved. In layman's terms, right? AlphaFold has solved a 50-year-old challenge. You can predict 3D structures of proteins, and that's been a grand challenge in biology for decades. And proteins, to be able to predict the 3D structure, that is so important because proteins are actually, they're the workhorses of what make up our body, right, at a cellular level. And so understanding the structure is really crucial to understand how they function and how to design drugs to interact with them. So it essentially is now going to, I always put my hand up with a funnel, right? But there's a funnel of like hundreds, thousands of things to be researching. AlphaFold can actually reduce that funnel so that researchers and scientists can actually focus on structures that actually need more attention, that have higher potential uses to create drugs that can interact with them really, really well. AlphaFold has received unprecedented accuracy in protein structure prediction and has really opened up a world of possibilities on how you understand diseases, how you can develop new medicines, designing new proteins that have specific functions that we don't even know about right now. So it is fantastic to see what the DeepMind team has actually done. I think that there is, right, this is not just for a pharmaceutical company or a biotech company. Of course, you can leverage AlphaFold models to accelerate drug discovery and development. But it's also meaningful for academic and research institutions, startups and innovators or innovative organizations that are actually looking at how do you build new solutions and applications on top of some of AlphaFold's capabilities. And so I really do think that AlphaFold is really an example of how AI can be used for good, right? You're pushing the boundaries of scientific discovery with that to improve human health.
So you and I have talked before about this corporate game that people have to play in order to succeed in corporate America. It's a game of internal politics, getting ahead in a world that's historically been established by predominantly white male leaders. And people with diverse backgrounds, such as women and people of color, often don't know how to play this game, or they may not want to play the game. But you've been able to build a very successful career in large organizations, not necessarily following the traditional path, but I'm sure it hasn't always been easy. Can you talk about what barriers or biases you faced along the way, and how were you able to develop your own voice and confidence as a leader?
What a loaded question, because of course the answer is yes, right? You're really hitting on an important point because navigating the quote corporate game, it's really challenging particularly for people who don't fit the traditional mold of leadership. And I really have, of course, I have encountered my share of barriers and biases that people had along the way. Maybe I'll give you my endpoint here now at the beginning. I think that's because of what we have gone through and the barriers and the biases that we've had to work against, Alissa, yourself included, right, is part of the reason why you're having this podcast. There's two types of leaders and women leaders, right? One is the one who's opening the door and like trying to shut it as fast as they can, right? Or the elevator door. The other is, who's going to hold the open button because there's a lot of, there's opportunity for many of us. If I can categorize certain experiences about the kind of barriers or the kind of biases, the one is most obvious is like a lack of representation. In many of these organizations that I worked with, leadership has been predominantly white, predominantly male. And in of itself, it wasn't a challenge, except this lack of representation makes it harder to find mentors or sponsors or people who understood my experiences. As a woman or somebody of color, you often, I feel like I've been underestimated, particularly early in my career, where people made assumptions about my aspirations, assumptions about my capabilities, pigeonholed me in certain roles or certain titles. On the other hand, I would say sometimes there are things that, might be perceived as, cultural differences could actually be something that I would consider positive. At first, I used to think it was negative. My communication style or the way I would approach a problem might be perceived differently. And now I find it actually an advantage, right? That I'm looking at things differently. Maybe my style of sometimes not sugarcoating things might actually be a positive thing. And rather than something that, I'm not fitting into the norm of being able to share bad news, but make it seem very sweet, right? So there's also that piece, right? That I think that sometimes it can work to your advantage. But there's certainly been times that I think that there's age, there's race, there's sex, there's all of that has really impacted the way that I thought about, how to navigate my career. I remember there was a phase of life where I was in where my manager at the time took me into a meeting and told me, you don't need to say anything because until you have enough gray hair on your head, nobody's going to believe you. And now I'm on the other side where I'm like, okay, I have enough gray hair on my head. Now did we make it? So, but jokes aside, I think that certainly there have been barriers that have had to be overcome. You can only overcome some of those, Alissa, I think, by just experiencing enough. Because the first few times it happens, you don't even realize it's happening to you.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you, how did you get comfortable in your own skin and feel like you don't care as much, or that it becomes an asset? There was a time when I was working in orthopedics and showed up for my first hip surgery. This was in Europe. And the doctor, male, white doctor. So we walked into the operating room and I met him and he said, "Oh, I hear you're losing your virginity to me today." And I was just internally like, what did he just say? But you have to keep that smile on your face. Luckily I had the mask on and kind of laugh it off. So, there've been a lot of incidents like that teach you to get tougher skin. But yeah, it's still a challenge. How do you react to those things?
Right. And thank you for sharing that. Right. I've also, I recall an experience in one of my earlier research days where we were doing a lot of cadaver work. And there was a joke that was made, right? That, hey, Shweta, go in there and tell us how many of those bodies are male and how many are those female. And, the people thought it was hilarious to send me in there to go see these half thawing cadavers. They were that lower half of the body. I share this story to lead into the fact that part of like how you overcome this was, I think one of it was also blind, like, I'm not going to let it bother me. I was like, fine, I'll go and count. Okay, we have 4 male and 3 female or whatever it was. So part of it was just realizing that, like, just don't take it personally, right? I think that was a big, and I mean, it's so much easier said than done. I personally know that, but part of it was just like blindly moving forward. The other way was also around finding your tribe, right? Finding people who are going to be your mentors and allies. And I said right at the beginning of the career, it was difficult because everybody around me, could still advocate for me, of course, but it was different. It was different. But I found people inside my organization and outside my organization, people who were in my phase of life, but people who are also a couple of chapters ahead in their different phase. So that was another piece, right? I think is like finding people who you trust, who aren't just going to say yes, yes, yes. The other one was also, I built a strong track record. You own your own track record. And so I focused on, no matter what it was, on delivering results, working harder than everyone else, and building a track record, right? So it was really about earning the respect and recognition of peers and leaders beyond, right? It doesn't matter what role I had. And then and something switched, Alissa, where people then started coming to me for mentorship and asking me, how did I do it? You realize that, somewhere along the way, you overcame enough that now you get the chance to help others, right? And help them navigate the new version of challenges that some people might be going through now today.
Yeah, I love that. And the idea that you shared earlier about becoming one of those women who actually holds the door open for others. And you are one of those women.
Thank
So
you.
I've heard you say before that success is being able to sleep at night. And that always resonated with me. Can you tell us more about that? And how do you get a good night's sleep?
I'm so glad that you remember that. And it's such a simple thought, right? But when you think about it, really, there's so many things in this world, right? Maybe what you ate or all of these other things. But really, what I'm saying that I'm referencing your integrity and your ethics, not just the balance and well-being, which I think is of course very important, but being able to, and I don't mean to sound overly philosophical for this conversation, but like having that inner peace, right? There have been evenings, right, where you can't sleep because your mind is racing about something at work that's happening, or some conversation at work didn't go well, or you're missing a deadline, or something is not working well, lost a deal. But I also sometimes lose sleep because I realize, oh, I was short with a loved one, and that was actually a moment where I didn't compartmentalize that something that should have been work related, actually spilled over into my personal life and things like that. And then I think about it and I feel guilty about it. And so I realize that I can only control that, right? I can control that by the choices that I make. And of course, over time, you have to learn how to compartmentalize some of these things in order to be able to move forward. And compartmentalizing, meaning like if something is not going well at work, when you end your workday, whether that's at 5 o'clock in the evening or 10 o'clock at night, you shut it down. But then there's also the aspect of just being able to think about this in a manner that maybe I should say, like, realizing that it's just one night, right? It's just a night of sleep and that you get to start over the next day. And so I have to sometimes remind myself that, I'll be able to restart the day again. But being able to say that I can sleep at night, it's a reminder to pursue your goals with integrity, balance, and focus.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I think that'll help a lot of people. Maybe our final question is, what advice would you give to your younger self about navigating your career while staying true to yourself? Like, how do you stay grounded in your life?
I often think, like you can have the hardest day. Alissa, you and I have gone through some pretty crappy days together, even in our own careers, when we work together, all of this. There are, even on our worst day, we are what I would have dreamed of being when I was younger. I would tell myself to embrace the uniqueness,
Love it.
embrace my uniqueness, right? I think don't be afraid that we're different. We look different. We think differently, but that's an advantage, not a disadvantage.
And I have to slip in one more question because I brought it up at
Sure.
the beginning, which is that you are an almond farmer. Can you just quickly tell us more about that?
We do quite a lot of almond farming, and we wholesale to what ends up becoming some of the larger almond producers in the world. And it's great because it allows you to get closer to nature. It allows you to interact with a set of people and set of an industry that I would normally not be able to interact with. And so we love our almonds. We love the orchard and, being able to grow them, but it is also, it's just such a fantastic way to also share pieces of of the work that's done, because I get to share almonds with friends and family. So we love the almond farms.
I will send you my address.
Absolutely.
So Shweta, it's been so fun chatting with you and learning about your leadership dance. And I love seeing the impact that you're making through your work, in your community, as a mom. And I hope you continue to get a good night's sleep. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tune in, share, and subscribe for more episodes of The Leadership Dance, where we explore how to choreograph the career of your dreams and chat with visionary leaders who are breaking barriers in the arts and business worlds. Until next time, keep dancing.